Good evening. On behalf of Lincoln Way Community District 210, Lincoln Way West High School, and the new Lenox Safe Communities Coalition, we would like to welcome you. I'm Holly Pearson, the PPS Director here at Lincoln Way West High School, and a member of the new Lenox Safe Communities Coalition. The new Lenox Safe Communities Coalition aims to provide important education, prevention, and support to keep our community safe. Vaping has become more prevalent and therefore an increasing threat to the safety of our community. Tonight, we have a dedicated panel members who will share their experience and their expertise. Our tables in the auditorium lobby will also be open after the presentation. At the end of this evening's presentation, we will have a question and answer session. Please utilize one of the question and answer cards to write your questions. We will collect those cards from the audience in order to facilitate the question and answer session at the end. Please join me to welcome Mayor Tim Balderman.
Thank you and good evening. On behalf of our village, we'd like to welcome you all here tonight and thank you for coming out on a cold night when we know that you're all very busy in your lives. So for you to take the time out, that's great. It's nice to see members of our community, families that are here together. We greatly appreciate that. Thank you to Lincoln Way, always such a great host and a great partner with us here. We work very closely with our school districts, and Lincoln Way is just amazing every time we need to partner with them. Our Safe Communities Coalition, we are now the only community in the state of Illinois that has that designation. The World Health Organization recognizes that we are a safe community. There are over 150 communities throughout the world with that designation. Dan Martin heads that up for us, and so Dan, I'd like to give you a round of applause for all of your efforts you do. But it takes great partners to do that. It's not just the village, and so we're grateful for all of our partners, all of the vendors that are here tonight, the people that are willing to speak. It means a lot to us. You know, I was talking to Dan beforehand. As the mayor of this community, it's important that we have this kind of dialogue. We just went through a month and a half of dialogue about recreational marijuana in this community, and we had a lot of people that were against it and a lot of people that were for it. At the end of the day, what we feel our main obligation is providing information. This is not about beating anyone up. This is about providing information, factual information, giving everyone an opportunity to hear that and to be a part of the discussion. We don't want to be a community that just makes decisions without listening to you or without telling you why we're doing what we're doing. And this is another example of that tonight. I've had people, we don't have vaping shops in the community that are solely vaping shops. We had one, and there were issues that came up with it and concerns that we had. But we had people come to the board and say that, hey, you know, vaping helped me quit smoking, and it's been good for me. And so I'm not a smoker. I don't vape. To be perfectly candid with you, we did some research on it when we made our decisions. But again, we know there are people that have strong opinions one way or another, and that's why we want to have a factual discussion tonight. So we're happy to see that tomorrow, I know at least my daughter's a senior at Lincoln Way Central. They're devoting a great deal of time for the entire school to partake in discussion there. I don't know, maybe it's happening at West and East, I'm not sure, but I know it is at least at Central. So we're very happy to see that happen. And again, we're grateful for all of you being out here tonight. Thank you for attending. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Balderman. Please welcome Ruby Johnson. Ruby will share her firsthand experience with the vaping epidemic.
My name is Ruby Johnson. I grew up in New Lenox, and my husband and I are raising our 7 kids here, from a college freshman down to a kindergartner. We're currently parents of 4 teenagers. A little more than 2 months ago, I loaded up our oldest daughter to make the drive to Colorado to begin her freshman year of college. As we set out, she was coughing and complaining of pain in her chest when she took a deep breath. Within a few hours, she began to shiver like she was running a fever. She also admitted to me that she had been vaping. What was supposed to be one of the most joyful times of her life and an exciting rite of passage for us as a family turned into a terrifying near-death experience that involved a week-long hospital stay. Our daughter went from a healthy 18-year-old to a patient fighting for her life. When we arrived in her college town, we went directly to an urgent care and then were sent to the hospital. She was nauseous, tachycardic, coughing, running a high fever, couldn't take a deep breath, and struggled to keep her oxygen up. A CT scan showed what the doctors initially called a diffuse pneumonia all over her lungs. Though antibiotics were started immediately, her condition continued to worsen and she was transferred to the ICU in case she needed more extreme life-saving measures. With every doctor came the same question: are you a smoker? Finally, they asked, how about e-cigarettes? Her answer to that question was yes, though it wasn't until she'd seen 3 doctors that it actually seemed to be taken seriously. An accurate diagnosis took days. I'll never forget watching her cry that she literally couldn't breathe without excruciating pain as she was pumped full of IV fluids, antibiotics, steroids, pain meds, anti-nausea meds, and a diuretic to clear fluid from her badly inflamed lungs. Every time she'd try to get out of bed, her oxygen would dip so low that her alarms would go off. Her belly was dark purple from the nightly injections they gave her to prevent blood clots. It took several days of her condition deteriorating, every viral panel and culture coming back negative, along with 2 dedicated doctors who reached out to other doctors and hospitals who'd seen similar cases in order to determine the best course of treatment for her. Her pulmonologist said that he feared that if we'd waited another 24 hours to seek medical attention, she'd have most likely been unresponsive on a ventilator. Our daughter ended up being one of the lucky ones in this case because she got to leave the hospital, but it could have so easily been a totally different tragic outcome. I think we can all agree that it can be so difficult to be a parent in today's world. Our kids are up against more than we ever were, and we know that the adolescent years are when kids are more likely to take risks, and they're also the years where their brains are more vulnerable to substances such as nicotine and THC. We hope that we can parent them through these years and teach them responsibility for their choices, especially the bad ones, and that they'll learn from it. It is, however, really scary that there's an industry full of largely unregulated products that are not only easily accessible to youth, but so desirable because of the huge array of flavors and marketing targeted at kids. Add in the fact that the e-cigarette products favored most by our kids are designed to be hidden from parents and teachers, looking like a flash drive as this one, pens and Apple Watches, with vapor that you never see or that disappears almost instantly. It could seem like we're fighting a losing battle. But our kids' health and safety isn't a fight we can afford to walk away from. We decided to share our story for a few reasons. The biggest driving factor was that my daughter wanted to warn her peers and friends so no one would have to go through the same nightmare or worse. I always take it with a grain of salt when my teenagers tell me everybody's doing it, but in this case, it's closer to the truth than I could have ever imagined. The newest National Youth Tobacco survey numbers just came out and show that in 2019, over 10% of middle schoolers and nearly 28% of high schoolers are using e-cigarettes. These numbers are so alarming. Dr. Weiner will go into this more, but there's a history of deceptive practices surrounding these companies and the industry as a whole. Kids were marketed to, the products are largely unregulated, and youth were misled as to the safety of these devices and products. They're sucking mass amounts of nicotine deep into their lungs, often moving on to THC and passing their devices back and forth between each other. What's in these products isn't fully known, and that's not applicable only to the counterfeit products because the FDA has not done its job in regulating these products. E-cigarettes were allowed to flood the market because of a loophole in the language of local, state, and federal laws regarding tobacco. There were kid-friendly flavors, marketing that targeted youth, and they were being sold to our kids until the laws could catch up, which is one of the other reasons we decided to share our story. Even with the risk of being judged as bad parents, we felt blindsided by this whole situation. Our kids were exposed to and often vaping before a lot of us parents even knew that it existed or what was going on. I remember finding a small zippered cosmetic pouch in my daughter's room and literally having no idea what I was looking at. Looked like a flash drive, and then I saw the little pods. I have one in my pocket here. It's a little Juul refill pod. I had to Google it to even figure out what it was. When I confronted her, she used the teenager's first line of defense. "It's not mine, I'm holding it for a friend." And we believed her, until we found more later on down the road. And we did all the right things, we thought. We talked to her about how we wouldn't tolerate that in our house. We threw everything away, we grounded her, and we made her bedroom door stay open. And she stopped for a while, until she didn't. And then she continued to use the products behind our backs, which really isn't that hard to do because of the sneaky nature and how discreet so many of these products are. After she got sick and came clean, my daughter told us she'd been doing it on and off for 18 months or so, and when she was at her heaviest usage, she was going through 2, 3, or even 4 pods a week. For reference, one Juul brand pod has the nicotine equivalent of an entire pack of cigarettes. But Juul's not the only one that makes them, so products like this, which are Juul compatible pods, have even more nicotine. All this info was mind-blowing to me, and as soon as we shared our story, I started getting hundreds of messages from other parents who were also battling this same thing in their home and were also blindsided when they found out that their kids were vaping. I joined with PAVE, Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, a grassroots movement founded by 3 moms who also were blindsided when a Juul representative came into their kids' 9th grade classroom through an outside presenter talking up their product. I've had the opportunity to speak out against the predatory practices of this industry. I've testified before Congress in Washington, D.C., met personally with Senator Durbin to discuss the youth vaping epidemic, partnered with the American Heart Association to mobilize efforts around reducing youth usage, and testified at hearings in both the House and Senate in Springfield. But being here tonight feels even more important to me because this is my home and this is my community. It's where the people I love and care for live and where my kids go to school. There are so many ways to get involved and advocate for our kids, and they need us to do that more than ever. Whether it's in your home, conversations with your kids, their friends, in your school, or by contacting your legislators. As you probably know, there's a lot of legislation being proposed on both the state and federal level. The Trump administration has promised to address this issue, and there are several bills that are in Illinois right now. I had the privilege of testifying for one of them a couple weeks ago. It is to restrict the sale of flavored e-cigarettes, and it did pass out of the Senate committee yesterday. There are also some other bills out there, one especially that will include e-cigarettes in the Smoke-Free Illinois Act. Our daughter's situation is indicative of this mysterious lung illness outbreak, but it points to the bigger issue. There's an entire new generation of youth addicted to nicotine because of e-cigarettes. We've been 100% honest all along. The vast majority of what our daughter used was nicotine e-cigarettes, but like so many teenagers, she also used products containing THC. And while the CDC has identified vitamin E acetate, often found in THC vapes, as a chemical of concern in these lung illnesses, they also haven't ruled out other chemicals or products as a culprit. The vapor industry would like you to believe that these products are perfectly safe and need to be available for adults to use as a way to quit smoking. However, there are only 7 FDA-approved smoking cessation methods, and e-cigarettes are not one of them. In addition, the long-term and short-term safety of these products is not well known. Like I said, the real issue, aside from the illnesses and deaths we're hearing about, like our family lived through, is the rampant youth usage of nicotine vaping products. And each one of us has the ability to advocate for change for our kids. I'm only one mom, we're only one family, but when we work together as parents and educators, administration, medical professionals, and legislators to educate, empower, and affect change, that's the only way we're going to be able to conquer this problem and keep our kids safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. If you have a question for Ruby, please write it on the card, and Dan Martin and some of our staff members will collect those. Please welcome Elpais Patel. Elpais is an epidemiologist with the Will County Health Department.
Thank you. Hi, that's me, Alpesh Patel. I am the epidemiologist with the health department. We have gone through a lot of stories, like Ruby's daughter, investigated tons of cases involving long conversation with the state and the CDC, investigating from the ER all the way to the outcome of the cases to understand what's going on. So health department job is to understand what is this unusual respiratory illness that we are dealing with, and how can we identify quick enough so that there is a public education and there is information that we can share with community to stop this. So it's a long battle. We are learning pieces by pieces every day, and I'm going to share with you some of the findings that we identified from start of this outbreak until now, and it's still ongoing. We are not done yet, but we have quite a few pieces of puzzles figured out already. So I'm going to share with you some of the findings based on the Illinois data. CDC collects data throughout this country, and they have more detailed data from different states. So I'm going to talk about the Illinois data. So until yesterday, Illinois has reported 179 cases. And cases means any evidence of respiratory illness with no other cause identified. So all this illness is reported. We try to do all the testing to make sure that it's not caused by something else. So these are 179 cases, and there are 4 deaths. 4th one is reported today. Until yesterday, it was just 3. So you can imagine that it's not over. We are still losing people to this epidemic. So we moved from opioid to vaping very quickly, and now this is going to be the new challenge for the public health and the community to deal with. This is the map of the Illinois with the counties who has the cases. As you can see, there are 23 counties reported. Most of them are in the northern part of the state. Some of them are in the central, but eventually almost all the populated areas in the Illinois is reporting the cases. Now, if you look at these are the cases that we identified through surveillance over a period of time, and as you can see, the actual sporadic cases started reporting in February. That's where the first case was reported in Illinois, and Illinois was the first state in the country to be, started having this illnesses reported. We don't know, other state might had it, but they never got to the point where the investigation was done to really link with this. But this is the first time we know that there is some sort of unusual respiratory illness or the lung injury among some of these individuals who has no other underlying conditions that we are seeing. And then it started picking up during the summer months, and it picked out, and now we are seeing some slowdown, but still it's keep adding. So we have seen the surge, but now we are keep seeing the slowdown in the new cases. But the number of cases that we are seeing is still going up and up. So we still categorize as an epidemic of the vaping-related lung injuries. Now the same thing, we are looking at the hospitalization among these cases, and you can see the same trend. Most of these people who had symptoms are hospitalized during that time frame. Now let's talk about we interview each and every individual in the state to learn about what has happened, who are they, what did they do, how did this happen, and what's the outcome. So kind of like in the epidemiology, we're trying to learn the basics, who, what, where, and how. That's our goal, to understand that how it started, who is getting sick, how are they getting sick, and what's making them getting sick. So if you look at it, the predominantly male, about 2/3 of all the cases are male, and look at the number under age 18 and under. 23% of the cases were in that. That means there were the teenagers, there were the young people into the, the schools, and those were the first one that we started identifying, but eventually it actually spread to big range. So the median age range is 13 to 75. That tells you that the cases are among all age group from 13 to 75 in Illinois. And we have seen that's among the young ones as well as among the old ones. So it's not that only the young ones are getting sick, it's making other people sick too. Again, predominantly white, non-Hispanic, among both, we interviewed as well as the cases that we investigated. Now let's get into the little bit of the exposure characteristics. This is where actually more data digging as well as interview process, very challenging interview process to deal with this age group. First of all, they do not want to share information. Second thing, they are always afraid that their parents will be not happy when they get interviewed. So it's very challenging to get this age group to really talk and provide the truthful information. They can give you any garbage. We listen to them, and parents are sitting actually, when we are talking to them on the phone or when they are into the hospital bedside, we sometimes use, the social worker as well as the bedside nurse to really go through when the parents are not there to understand that, what's going on, because they are not actually giving us the entire history. And then eventually we find out, and based on all the data we collected, as you can see that, nicotine use in e-cigarette 3 months prior to the symptom onset was in 63%. But then look at the TSC, 85% of them having used TSC one or other form. I'll share with you a little bit more, breakdown of the TSC products that they use that we never knew about it. But these are all the data collection they're telling us what they're doing. And those symptomatic patients are predominantly using the TSC related products or the substracts. Now also we try to do the counter interrogation to understand, is it the one substance or more than one substance? So if you look at it, only nicotine use, only 17%. They say, they have used multiple products. Same thing with the TSC. Only TSC use? No. Multiple products. So these are the, different things that we try to understand that, okay, you are using e-cigarette, but in e-cigarette, in the vaping device or any other device you are using, what are you using? We know that the legally available products are only few, handful, but that there are so many other stuff that they are telling us that we did not know. So basically at the end, we do not really, TSC and nicotine were kind of like combined in most of this, but predominantly we found out that the TSC was very commonly used by these individuals. Here is the breakdown of the products. So you can see different names, the products. We don't even know what is this DANG, TKO, smart cards. These are their words. We are just actually giving you the words. They tell us, then we Google those words to understand what these products are. They are not actually legal products, but they are street names. And street name means you are just guessing what is that. And we are actually collecting those specimens to send it to the FDA and to the CDC to test and see what in those products are, what concentration, what's made up of. So these are the products that we actually identify from our cases who are willing to share. So you can see that out of 170 plus cases, only 82 actually provided us the little bit more detailed exposure data. And the TSC related products, as you can see, are still dominating into this. And then obviously, we were helping to understand this, so we were collecting a lot of specimens. I personally went to the Bolingbrook Hospital to collect the specimen from a kid who gave me a full bag of almost 25 to 30 cartridges. Out of that, almost 80% of the cartridges had no labels. So I had no idea what product they are using, where they got it from, what's the name. All you can see is different cartridge with different colors. It looks like that they are actually living with this poison, but they have no idea what they are doing it. And if you ask them, we ask them, how many you are using in a day, what you are using, what you are mixing, no clue. So it's kind of like so much out there that we have no idea. We are learning day by day. So FDA had got tons of samples from all over the country, including from Illinois, and basically they are trying to figure it out from the different testing and to find out. First of all, we found out there is no infectious disease involved by doing all the testing from the specimen that we received from the hospitals. So there was some sort of chemical-induced pneumonia. Then after, all these interviews are telling us that they are using either the nicotine products or the THC. So let's try to get the more forensic investigation to understand what kind of contents this kind of product has. So you can see that out of 595 samples, they have undergone some level of testing. 70% of them contain THC. And out of those 70%, 50% of those contain vitamin E acetate as a diluent. Now vitamin E, we think vitamin E is kind of like, okay, everyone takes as a vitamin. This is not the same way. The vitamin supplements or the vitamin you consume or you use into the skin cream or any of those cosmetic products are not this product. These are the ones that use as a diluent into this product to make it a little thicker. But what happens is that when these products are put into these vaping devices, they create the aerosolizes. And those aerosolized vitamin E, when you inhale, it's known to damage lungs. So those are the inhaled vitamin E. That's been what we are talking. So people get confused. I also take vitamin E. I don't get sick. This is not the same vitamin E form. This is the inhaled form, and that's what. And we have no idea what concentration, how they are using. And most of these products that people have used are not legal products. So there is no way to know where it's coming from and who is making them. But these are the findings that tell us that these are the prime suspect of all these cases. So as I just said about the vitamin E acetate as the diluent that they identified in most of the cases, and I just discussed about how vitamin E acetate, when it's inhaled, it may interfere with the normal lung functioning, and those are the ones that has created lots of lung injuries. And when these kids are using, as he said, one cartridge can be delivered entire pack of cigarette. Same way, one cartridge of THC extract can deliver so much of the marijuana extract that these kids have no idea. And that with the vitamin E acetate, so they're actually mixing up, giving lots of things into their lung that we have no idea, and those harmful substances are sometimes creating the acute illness. And that's what these cases are, that frequency, number of times they are using, and what concentration they are using, we have no idea, and that's what we are trying to learn. None of these cases really give us the frequency. They say, oh, I used 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. They're all over, because they don't want to, see, it's a stigma. They don't want to admit that, I'm doing something bad. They know that this is a poison, but I'm doing poison in a different way because I like it. It's a cool thing. My friends are doing it, I'm doing it, but I'm also getting something else that I don't want to tell you. So there is a lots of missing pieces that we don't know. But as of now, we know that these are the stuff that's been identified. So in summary, basically right now, the national guidelines is just telling that, you should not use e-cigarette or vaping products that contain THC and that are obtained from the informal sources. That means either from friends, family, or from the street dealers. Because those are the illegal products, not regulated, no idea, they are probably tainted. There are a lot of tainted products available. We have seen outbreaks with the tainted, illicit drugs. And some of these cartridges might carry those, who knows? And there are home-based operations going on to refill these cartridges all over. So communities are flooded with legal products and 100 times more illegal products, which we have no idea, and that's what we are dealing with in the public health right now, that how can we educate people to understand that, there are so many danger out there with these vaping products, and these devices are nothing but just the one mechanism that kids can get 1,000 different products to harm themselves, and the price that the society will pay will be humongous. So kind of like this is where we stand right now. Outbreak is ongoing. We are still investigating more and more cases, and we are still getting calls every day from hospital ERs, from various places. So we are investigating them, identify whether these are the cases that qualifies or fits into the case definition of the cases associated with this. Because sometimes we just think that, okay, this person is denying. There are cases where they have denied that I do not vape. So now you can literally, okay, fine, we'll talk tomorrow. They started realizing that, I need to share because this is not right. And we said that, sometimes you are in denial. From the first time you ask them, did you do this? It's just like, how you ask kids, did you do this? Their first answer is no. So that's common reaction that we get, but then, eventually we know that they will start. So you need to create that, bonding with them and providing them, this is not to put you in trouble. This is to understand what caused this thing so that others can be prevented. So kind of like we try to work with this age group to make sure that, they feel comfortable working with us. Older people, they understand that, yeah, I do it, so what? But the younger crowd is more challenging because of their age, because of their surroundings, their parents, their peers, you name it. So it's a challenging outbreak, but we are getting to the bottom of it, and hopefully the data that we have will help to shape up the public messages to really educate the kids, youth, and the parents, to control this outbreak. And down the road, hopefully we'll see less number of deaths. That's the outcome that we want to see. We saw another death today. It's a sad thing. Life lost is a sad thing, especially if we see a young person die. That's not good. So our goal is always try to do more public education and help the community understand what they need to do. Okay, that's all I have. Dr. Weiner can take over. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Alpace. Please welcome Dr. Erin Weiner. Dr. Weiner is a licensed clinical psychologist and director of addiction services at Linden Oaks Behavioral Health.
Good evening, everybody. I am the caboose. Let's get this up and going. Well, I learned a lot. Thank you for that presentation. That was really interesting and really current. I think one of the things that's scariest about what's going on right now is it changes constantly. I'm going to have slides that look woefully outdated compared to what you just saw, but we've got to keep our eye on it. So I'm here this evening to talk a little bit about the context, because the context is important. Because whenever you see something like this going on, where there's tremendous problems and we're not seeing action, the answer to why, which might be what a lot of us are thinking, is money, quite frankly, and that there's an industry behind this, and that there's this counterbalance, and it's always this way in the addiction for profit world, where you are actually peddling a disease. So like in the behavioral health landscape, no one is selling depression. Nobody is selling trauma. Nobody is selling anxiety. But someone is literally selling addiction. And actually, if you look at business models for the largest companies for this, if you don't have people addicted to your product, you go nowhere. And so there's a lot of that underlies a lot of what we're seeing right now. And my hope is, for this last bit, and then we'll get to the Q&A, to just kind of provide some of that context to help frame what's going on right now. Because I feel like we're hearing two narratives, and the first is the one that we just heard about, right? Where you've got all these people who are falling ill, some of whom who are dying. This actually was a study I just saw a couple days ago, actually, that found that vaping might actually be worse for your cardiovascular health than cigarettes. There's just so much newness about this that we don't know yet, except that we know that it's very, very bad, all things considered. But then the other side is one where people are saying, like, don't give in to moral panic. And that there's this vaping hysteria and save vaping, vaping saved my life. And then we've got the shops, right? The vape shops who are saying, like, you're killing us off. Like, we're going to go out of business. And so there's a lot of different interests that are kind of pulling in different directions on this. But I think that they're coming from very different places. Some of it is well-intentioned, some of it's anecdote, and then some of it's science. And I think that knowing the difference between those things is critical. Because here's what we do know for sure, is that this is killing people, this is hospitalizing people. We heard from Ruby tonight. These were just two things that I pulled off the news. A 17-year-old from Gurnee, a 26-year-old from Burlington, Wisconsin, saying, like, you literally have no idea what you're putting into your body. And then the other one that Ruby also alluded to is what's going on with youth vaping, and that there was a 78% increase in high school students between 2017 and 2018, a 48% increase in middle school students, and for the first time in decades, actually, it's led to an increase in tobacco product use, because we know that if a young person vapes, they are more likely actually both to start vaping THC, but then also to use combustible cigarettes. And so there's actually, and this is one of the interesting parts that I think we're not all matching up. There's two different and distinct vaping epidemics going on right now. One of them is related to hospitalization and death. And we've talked a lot about that right now, and it might be vitamin E, it might be something else. I saw that Mayo Clinic published an article saying that it looked like chemical burns in the lungs, which isn't entirely consistent with vitamin E, so we're still figuring that out. But there's a separate one where young people are using this just hand over fist, more and more and more and more. And they're related, but they are actually very distinct. And so when you hear things about, like, say, flavor bans, that's getting at the youth vaping epidemic, not so much the death and hospitalization epidemic. They're both very important, though, but they have different causes and then also potentially different solutions. So why are young people using vapes? There's a few reasons. One is that they are easy to conceal. They're very low odor, no smoke. You can, like the Juul, for example, you can hide in your fist, take a pull off of it, either keep the vapor in your lungs long enough that it dissipates or blow it out into long clothing until it does. So it's very easy to conceal and be rebellious. It looks cool is something that we hear from a lot of young people. I think those of older generations don't necessarily see the appeal, but they're not being marketed to in quite the same way. And then there's also the entry into a social group or subculture, and this is actually key. So this has always been one of the greatest draws of drugs. It's that at a time in your life when you want to be part of something, where you want to figure out who you are and feel like you belong, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be funny, you don't have to be pretty. You don't have to have talents. All you have to do is take a substance and put it in your body, and you are part of the group. It's a social equalizer. And so what we see is that the young people who have fewer connections to pro-social things, fewer connections to family, fewer connections to things that keep them away from these products are more likely to use them, which does not mean that they are going to, or doesn't mean that you can't do all the right things as a parent, and that this definitely won't happen. It can happen to any young person, absolutely. But what we know is that this is a particular draw to someone who's looking to fit in. But the ones that I really want to touch on tonight are flavors and the formulation of these products, and then also the marketing tactics. Because when you look at what's going on with young people and the pressures that they face, this is all very intentional. So what do I mean by this? So the addiction for-profit industries have always targeted youth. When I do school assemblies and I show this picture, they've never seen anything like this before. And that's because we banned them for 10 years. They've been gone for a decade. These are flavored cigars. And this in 2009, when the Tobacco Control Act was enacted, the FDA was able to take these off the shelves, and they did, because we know that flavors disproportionately appeal to young people. We've known this for a decade. And so vape companies also know this, and they are doing it on purpose. Right? They're doing it on purpose. And a study that came out recently found that fruit flavors, menthol mint flavors, candy and dessert flavors are the most popular amongst young people, which is why when we're talking about flavor bans and getting at that side of the epidemic, that's really what we're looking at here. The ones that are actually flavored like tobacco, and actually menthol is vastly inferior to mint in terms of what young people want. That's really what they're going for. And to show you what this looks like, I think, this picture's some to Juul pods. We'll get there in a second. But I want to show you actually a website, or a couple of them anyway. So, because this is what it looks like when you're trying to actually buy these products. This is one website where you can do that. And these are the dessert juice flavors. And when you look at this, like here is the American flag popsicle, strawberry cheesecake. This is that drug that Bradley Cooper used in Limitless. slow-mo, tiramisu, strawberries and cream, vanilla butternut. And if we go over to the fruity flavors, there's some overlap, but there's kiwi berry, strawberry watermelons. And so, like, when you're looking at these and you ask yourself, is strawberry watermelons aimed at 55-year-old chain smokers, or is it aimed at young people? I think it's pretty clear what they're going for here, right? And so you don't necessarily have to depict like a 15-year-old vaping in order to appeal to 15-year-olds. What Ruby was mentioning in terms of alternative pods, here's an example of one of them, where actually they do have even more nicotine in them. This is 6%. Juul, the top amount is 5%. So they've got more nicotine, and even if Juul, which actually did pull its flavors recently, now granted that's with a federal ban coming down the pipe, and they've been doing this for years, but they did. You can just buy these, right? It's not hard to do. And then there's even alternative ones. I know one high school that I was at a couple days ago actually mentioned that now the preferred product are Stigs, which are disposable. And they cost $7 each. So there are a pack of cigarettes in each one. Each one costs $7. Juul pods are a little bit cheaper, more like $4.25. And they've still got the flavors, right? Tropical mango, mighty mint, mango bomb. So, part of this is that this is part of why the legislation that Ruby was alluding to is so important. State, federal, et cetera. Because you just because one person's not doing it, for PR reasons or not, you could just go somewhere else and do the same thing. And there actually is a deterrent to making something illegal. I know that there's a lot of people saying, well, then they're just going to go to the black market, but there is a reason why alcohol, there's the addiction rate to alcohol in this country is 6%. 6% of the country right now has a diagnosable alcohol use disorder. Every other illicit substance combined is 2%. We're taking tobacco out of it. So there's 3 times as many combined everything else. So when something is illegal, that actually is a deterrent to those of us who I'm going to affectionately call rule followers. I'm amongst that group. But there are many of us who actually are not necessarily so keen on buying off the black market or breaking the law. And so that's part of where the legislation is actually very important on this issue. So bring us back to our presentation. So Juul in particular, we're going to talk about this for a minute because they are Goliaths in the industry. They have like an Amazon-sized market share. It's like 75%. And so when we talk about what the industry is doing, we really have to look at the people who are driving the car. And this comes from a really interesting article, The Juul Lure Teenagers and Get Customers for Life. You can find it online. New York Times put it out. But this is what their early ads looked like. And again, like what demographic does this appeal to? Not the older one, right? And this, again, Ruby also alluded to at a congressional hearing. Juul did go into 9th grade classrooms and say their device was totally safe. And there's also a paper trail that shows that they spent $200,000 on social media influencers. And again, you don't get at the parents on Instagram, or Snapchat. Like that's not where you go for that. And so it's very clear how this snowball got started. And even though they've done things in the past 2 or 3 months, Juul has specifically to not be moving in this direction. The snowball's already gotten going. There's a Reuters article that found that they actually disregarded very early evidence that they were hooking teens and kept going anyway. And a new study revealed, this was back in 2018, that teens are 16 times more likely to use Juul than older age groups. And so if you back up for a second and think about this as a business, which it is, if 92% of your revenue comes from teenagers, what would happen if they stopped using your product? You'd go belly up. And this is, again, like the alcohol companies, they're like drink responsibly. If everybody drank responsibly, they would actually go out of business. There was a study that found that 75% of the profits of big alcohol come from the top 10% of users. These are the people who drink 10 drinks or more per day. You could not have big alcohol without alcoholism. Wouldn't exist. This is the way the addiction market works. Just a couple more examples of this. These were a couple articles from Forbes. Ahead of that congressional hearing in July, Juul was putting $4 million in lobbying payouts a year. They were on pace for this. And again, what are you doing with that $4 million on the federal level, right? It's not to keep people safe. The vaping industry as a whole actually sued the FDA, the biggest industry group, to delay the review. It was mentioned that these products, we don't know what's in them. Well, the FDA said, we need all of your products by May of next year, May of 2020, to make sure that they're safe. And they got sued by the vaping industry, saying that's too soon. while everything that you just saw is going on. And Juul alone spent $4.3 million in San Francisco, which was the first city to ban vape sales, to keep them on the shelves. And of course, you pay that because you'll make far more money selling them than you will if they're banned. This is not about health. This is not about health. For these people, it's about money because it's their business. And they were actually formulated to be as grabby as possible. So this was part of how, when they filed their IP, when they filed their patent for their formula, they intentionally designed it, the nicotine, to get into the blood as fast as possible to have a greater chemical hit. This was part of their argument. They were saying earlier e-cigarettes, actually before them, the statistic was only about 1 out of 5 people who used an e-cigarette kept using it, because the nicotine didn't hit your blood fast enough. So they devised a way, by adding benzoic acid, to have far more nicotine get into your blood faster, even faster than cigarettes. And their rate of retention was closer to 60%. 60% of people who tried a Juul would continue. It's on purpose, right? And the stated purpose, right, is, well, this means that you won't see a fall off from cigarette smokers, right? Because they're getting something that's even punchier. But that means it's even punchier for everybody. It's on purpose. So I guess, so to frame this, the final bit, do these ads look familiar to you? More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. 20,000 physicians say Luckies are less irritating. And I don't know if any of you saw Mad Men, but it's toasted. That was actually a real thing. This one, they're actually saying smoke cigarettes to avoid gaining weight. So it says, the shock of facing what your figure may become, and carry on, avoid that future shadow. You can see they got jowls there in the shadow. Nicotine is a stimulant, speeds up your metabolism. So they're saying use cigarettes to not gain weight. And this one, now scientific evidence on effects of smoking. Chesterfield is best for me. You know, he's probably not smiling because he's killing himself slowly, but this is what they would do, right? And the legacy of big tobacco, it's still killing 480,000 people a year in this country alone. 480,000 people a year due to cigarettes. And they were doing this because they're trying to they're trying to mask the fact that their products are killing people, because they're not trying to help people. They're trying to make money. And that's what this industry is about. This just came out in February of 2019. What they found was that 95% of papers without a conflict of interest with the vaping industry, this is research papers, found potentially harmful effects of vaping. And that industry-related conflicts of interest were strongly associated with finding no harm of e-cigarettes. Same thing. Exactly what the cigarette companies do. They fund their own research, which say that they are less harmful. And this was a study that looked at exactly that. So what we're hearing right now in the public discourse is that you've got this choice, right? This is the biggest defense of like why we shouldn't ban flavors, why we shouldn't put a hold on this. Because, I mean, can you imagine like if what you just heard from these speakers was happening with lettuce? It'd be gone, like one hint of Listeria or E. coli, it's gone, right? And like we're voting to open marijuana shops, you know what I mean, to sell these vaping things, or we're still like it's amazing the disconnect in how we look at these different things. But we're being presented with this idea that there's this dichotomy between either we're vaping or we're pushing people back to smoking and we're killing people. But as Ruby alluded to, like I could give you like Chantix, Nicorette, Zyban, cognitive behavioral therapy has been shown to be effective. Hypnosis actually has too. It's not like your choices are cigarettes or like a blueberry vape. Like that's actually not the way this works. If someone wants to stop smoking, there are options. And so what I would suggest, what I would posit, is that you could actually do both. And that maybe the best option is not doing either of these things and having policies and practices that reduce the use of nicotine for fun. Because that only leads us down paths that are less healthy and less, they do not lift us up. They only bring us down. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weiner, and all of our speakers for sharing your experience and expertise. We will now begin the question and answer session. If each of you could just take out your little question card, and if you have a question, fill that out, and if you just hold it up, we have a few people that'll walk around. Dr. Colleen, Dan Moore, Tricia Taylor will collect your questions.
I will get the party started. And I want to actually just take this opportunity to say one more thing, which is that if you guys come here tonight and are like, wow, that was interesting, and then go home and then don't do anything, this is like a waste of an hour, right? Because we have to talk about this. We have to call, if you care about this issue, if you've been impacted by this, you have to talk to people who are using vapes, who are thinking about using vapes, talk to legislators, because if we don't get action, this continues to happen. So information is great, but used information, even better. So the question is there a health risk to kids just being around vaping without using vaping devices? The quick answer to that is yes. Actually, secondhand vape aerosol has been found, and we didn't go too far into exactly what toxins and carcinogens are in there, but there are a lot actually. A study out of Berkeley Labs found 31 different toxins and carcinogens in vape juice, and yes, that's even ones without nicotine in them. There's a lot of it, and it does get aerosolized as well. Something that I just want to throw out along with this question. A lot of people, young people in particular, say, well, it didn't say that they're, like, this isn't on the label, right? This is just like nicotine salts in water or that sort of thing. There's no regulation on this. So one, you literally don't know what's inside, and two, when you superheat things, they change their chemical composition. So for example, one of the most common things we find in vape aerosol is formaldehyde. And for the young people in the audience who haven't dissected a frog, that's embalming fluid. You also find that in cigarettes. But where that comes from, and this is completely true, you can look it up, is that when you superheat propylene glycol, which is one of the bases in just about every vape liquid, it decomposes into formaldehyde. And the flavors decompose as well. So just if it's not on the outside, that doesn't mean you don't know what you're putting into your body. And so yes, like if you walk into a high school bathroom and it's like you're hotboxing vape flavors, like yeah, there's still some toxins in there. It's not nearly as bad as inhaling it directly, but they are there.
One of the first questions is, how is your daughter? I guess there's a short answer, a long answer. She's doing well. So like I said, we were pretty lucky compared to some of the other outcomes in this. So she's able to, do normal activity. She's not cleared for vigorous exercise yet, which she says is good because she'd rather just do Netflix marathons than actual marathons. So, but she continues to follow up with her pulmonologist, and the kind of the long answer is these cases are new, so nobody can really tell us if there'll be permanent lung damage, but she does show improvement every time we see her pulmonologist. So, they kind of told us that with her being young and healthy before this happened, that we have no reason to believe that she won't recover. So that's what we're banking on. Do you want me to do more than one at a time? Yeah, okay. Did you notice a difference in your daughter's behavior with vaping, and did you smell it on her? Did I smell it on her? No, never. And I think notice a difference in her behavior. I don't know if any of you have teenage girls, but it's kind of hard to predict as it is. But looking back, it's kind of one of those things where they say, hindsight's always 20/20. And so now I look back and I think like, oh, was that because, she was vaping? And you kind of overanalyze things. One of the things that I will say, and she shared this with me, was that she would have it in her pocket, like her jewel in her pocket when she would go to the bathroom. And now I'm like, well, no wonder you were always in there, and that is one of the signs that, you'll hear people say to look for is my child vaping? Well, do they always, have an excuse to leave the table or go to the bathroom? And I'm not saying that that's, the only reason for that, but I've also, her teachers say that too. If you've got kids who are constantly wanting to go to the bathroom, that sometimes can be a red flag. So I would say that that's the one thing looking back that I've thought about a lot, and kind of feel like that was related. What did you say to your daughter regarding her friends and if they were using? It was one of those things where afterwards she was just 100% honest with us, and it was kind of, I joke, it was like the scene in Goonies, where he just spills his guts, she just told us everything. And so, yeah, her friends were using, which was why she wanted to kind of share her story, because she knew so many people that were. So I will say in this case, I feel like it's a blessing that she's been able to kind of have a fresh start. She's far away from home. She's, in a new place and making new friends, which I feel like when knowing how much of that was going on, for her to kind of have a clean break from that has been good. And, and her doctors were straight honest with her and said, never, ever, ever, for the rest of your life, should you ever take anything into your lungs except fresh air. And we're very clear with her that she could have died. And when you're 18 years old and you hear that, it's pretty sobering. So she's not touching it. And my last question here, it says, Ruby, I imagine it's difficult to facilitate conversations with your children around this topic for fear of judgment and punishment. What advice would you give to other parents who are trying to have honest conversations with their kids? Well, when this happened with my daughter, like I said, we've got 4 teenagers, and I just said, here it is. This is your get out of jail free card. Just tell me everything. And, I feel like if you can have a conversation with your kids and maybe just give them, it's like that day at the library, you can return all your books and you have no fines. Like, just give them that chance to be honest with you. And maybe it's not even a conversation that they want to have about them using it. It's what they're seeing at school, what they're seeing on social media. I mean, that's been a huge eye opener for me. My kids will come and show me kids that they go to school with, kids that go to other high schools, kids that they just know casually and what they're posting. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of these products are advertised peer-to-peer, and social media is like the little marketplace for that. So it's, hey, I've got carts for sale, or hey, I've got a Juul, meet me in the bathroom between 3rd and 4th hour, or hit me up for this. And that's how a lot of this is happening. The people say, well, if we just had stricter age regulations or stricter fines for the vaping shops or the convenience stores, then kids, are underage and not going to be able to go in and buy it. But if it's available, to our kids, if the flavors are there, if they're enticed, they're going to someone's going to get it and they're going to pass it among one another. So I feel like just getting rid of it in the first place so they can't have it. And I would just say too, that, I will say we, looking back, we wish that we would have done more, and we didn't know, but, there are nicotine and THC tests that are available. You can buy them on Amazon, you can get them anywhere, and sometimes that's a good safety net for your kids, to be able to say no when they're offered that in a social situation. Sorry, I can't, my parents drug test me. Sorry, I can't, my parents will find out. Sometimes our kids need us to be their safety net, and so sometimes it's not that they don't want to say no, it's that they don't know how to say no. So I would just say that's something that we've started doing and wish we would have done before.
Okay. So the first question is, does vaping always cause permanent lung injury? So let me explain a little bit about the terminology vaping that people use in common terms. It's a mix of things. Vaping means just inhaling an aerosolized substance. That's the generic terminology of vaping. Does everything you aerosolize and inhale cause injury? Simple answer is no. But the products that they are available in the market and people use in a different way, different products, mixing, all those substances can cause permanent lung injury. So that the simple answer is yes and no both, depending on what product, depending on what you're doing, and what kind of legal, illegal mix. So there is a lot more that can be answered for this question. But in short, if you are using illegal products, you have no idea, and yes, it can cause a permanent lung injury. That's the simple answer. Second, how long does one cartridge last? That's like how many times you puff. Person can pop so many times and can use the cartridge in a half day, in a day. So it's all about the habit. All this substance, eventually person create the tolerance, and until they don't get high, they keep taking it. and they have no knowledge what concentration. So you can imagine someone is keep puffing every few minutes, probably they are using up the entire cartridge in a day, depending on, and it's so easy. We have seen some of the kids puffing during like simple, if they are getting 2-minute break from the, class, they are just going underneath and taking puff from their backpack and just, taking it like that, because those doesn't smell, doesn't look, so it's all depending on the habit, and some individuals are just not understanding that how frequently, in what frequency they are doing. So any cartridge can last for a day or more or less, it depends on the frequency of use. This one is a very long question, so I'm reading it every sentence slowly. Vaping and nicotine consumption is an issue that more teens needs to be aware of. How concerned are you that the messages sent to teens are oversimplified? For example, there are not posters or efforts to inform the public that the amount of melanin an individual has impacts the absorption of nicotine. Would more specific info help to better reduce use? Obviously. So these are all pieces that we are learning that needs to be transferred into the public health messages, prevention programs, and education. So these all forums, all get, data sharing, information sharing is all to bring the awareness. Eventually there will be more efforts into the prevention and messages that they are already been developed. Health departments are ramping up, they are putting together the toolkits, and they are helping schools and the community to start making people aware of that, these are bad things and they need to be aware of what's going on, and they need to work towards the, preventing this epidemic to, go further. So yes, more specific messages will going to help, but it's a joint effort from public health and community, and these are all part of it, so that eventually more messaging will be going out. And you will see going down, health department will be putting together a lot of this kind of events, as well as some messaging, including billboards. You never know. It's all, we see need for things and we act upon. And these all initial outbreak investigations are helping to shape up the policies, public education, as well as efforts into the community to bring more education and prevention. So yes, I see that's going to happen more and more now, since we see more cases and more deaths. I think that's all I have.
I have one more. The question is, are there any safe vaping products without THC or the vitamin E acetate? So first off, we generally like to use the word less harmful, because safe is kind of a misnomer, because even if you aren't talking about fillers, they're not safe. There's still carcinogens, there's still toxins, there's still a lot in there. What I would say right now is that until that slide of vaping deaths and hospitalizations is 0, probably shouldn't do it. That's just my own opinion. Kind of mirrors the Surgeon General and the CDC a bit, though. We don't know what's causing it, so we don't know what exactly to avoid. That said, as Alpesh mentioned, the black market sources seem to be the majority, not all, actually, but the majority seem to be coming from street sources. So if you were trying to pick a less harmful option, that's probably your better bet at this point. But it's still, I would not recommend it for at least a bit longer, until the CDC isn't giving updates to the death toll every week.
And our last question for the evening, are there printouts of this information available to us? So we would like to invite you to visit the information tables out in the lobby. There's a lot of great information, some very similar to the presentation, that you're welcome to take with you. And we'd also like to thank Channel 6 for taping this presentation tonight. You'll be able to watch that on Channel 6. And if you would like to also follow us on our social media for the New Lenox Safe Communities, we will have some YouTube videos and little video clips online also, so you'll be able to watch it that way. So thank you so much. We appreciate you coming out.